Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month marks a new year, and I ask a question sometimes. You know, am I allowed to get better? Am I allowed to take steps to get better? Working in the mental health field, sometimes these questions a lot deeper. Sometimes it's more ambiguous what that means. Am I allowed to? A lot of times I get responses of course I am. But that also means, maybe reassessing, looking at yourself, what barriers we ourselves can be our own barriers. This month's theme is a brave healing, which I think for me, when I think about getting better or finding health or hope, not just maintaining our lives, but trying to better it can be at times a struggle, and at moments there's steps that may be, I guess, hard for us to take, and may take a bit of bravery or courage to get there. So is it, and I asked this question at the end, though, when I think about, am I allowed to get better, is it better to appear like I'm doing well, or is it more important that I'm actually doing well? A lot of times there's pressure, societal pressure, family pressure, culture that may be presented. So as we dive in, as we continue this month's theme of brave healing, I have a new guest. His name is Maurice Carroll. Thank you so much for coming on and just being on the podcast, sharing your insight. I really appreciate all angles of insight, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Just a short disclaimer: if you're in the States, 988 is a suicide crisis lifeline. I'd like to kind of add that this is a global thing when it comes to when we're struggling. I do encourage you, wherever you are around the world, to find what resources. It could be a club, or maybe a gathering, a group, whatever it is. If you could ask the question, I need help. I encourage you that. But in South Korea, it's 112. Sri Lanka, these are some other suicide hotlines around the world. So I encourage you to find what avenue for you to get the help that you need if you are in crisis. Just a short disclaimer. Thanks again, Maurice, for coming on. I always feel like people say it better than I do. And just to start our conversations, from Brienne Brown, she says, asking for help is a power move. It's a sign of strength to ask, and a sign of strength to fight off judgment when people raise their hands. So anything that comes to mind when you hear this and you think about healing, or anything you want to add?
Yeah. When you are asking for help, it's a power move, but it's more of an internal power move. Is the way that I see it. To me, and my experience when I'm working with my clients, and we have in our one-on-ones, what I've found is that most people have a tendency to look and are influenced by what the outside and what the outside influence is, and what the outside opinions are. And so asking for help is a power move, because society usually tells us that asking for anything of that nature is, a sign of weakness. You don't know, you don't have the information. No. So the power move is really you saying, it's a sign of humility.
Yeah.
And so saying, hey, I'm going to have this humility and say, I need help. Yeah, it is a power move, because number one, you're standing out from the crowd by admitting that. You're standing out and showing yourself that you have the gall and the bravery and and love for yourself to want to stand out within yourself. So that's definitely a power move.
And from your experience, what you've seen, maybe working with clients, why do you feel it may be hard for us to ask for help today? From your experience, what are those barriers that you've noticed?
What I've noticed really is that it's not commonplace for people to ask for help, because number one, it has a lot to do with the available information. Being, you can get on your computer or on your phone and do a search and find a variation of answers to whatever your question is. And so it's harder to say, hey, I need a little bit of help, and knowing that you might be judged to say by someone saying, hey, what do
Mhm.
you need help? All of these resources, what do you mean? And it
Mhm.
could be, and if you're like me, it could be a thing where you just don't know what questions to ask to
Yeah.
get, to get to those places of answer and progress. So
Mhm.
that's what that really means to me. Um,
Mhm.
and it's also harder because it puts you in a place of vulnerability when you
Yeah.
say, I don't know what I don't know, and
Mhm.
it puts you in a place of vulnerability. And now you have the glass house that is built around you, and everybody
Mhm.
can see you don't know something. And in the
Mhm.
age of information, it could be quite intimidating to say, I don't know something.
I totally agree. I was reading. I forgot who said this, but I'm going to paraphrase. Back in the day, censorship, we omitted information. Nowadays, censorship is we bombard people with irrelevant information. And
Yeah.
he says back in the day, they said power in the past, in ancient times, was to know things. Power today is what to ignore.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you think about concepts of information and how we have so much information, but it's not so much how much we have, but what does it mean for us? How is this like, what is this information and how we contextualize it or how we use that information for us? And I feel like it gets um it can get overwhelming. I do, when I think about why do I feel it's been harder to ask for help today, I think I could only speak from like my field, mental health, or even my experience struggling with mental health. One thing that usually time consuming when you're struggling with mental health, especially in the beginning, is you try to get people to understand what you're going through. And I would say 9 out of 10, or even more than that, 9.9, the responses are disappointing because the fact of the matter is no one's going to understand what you're going through. And that's a lonely place to be if you're, experiencing symptoms. And, they used to say back in the day, a lawyer shouldn't lawyer themselves, the doctor shouldn't doctor yourself, but we still try to do it ourselves. So I was in the Air Force. I remember when I'm frustrated I was working on aircraft. One tool doesn't fix everything. Sometimes you're using one tool. I'll be there hours and hours. So I do feel that all these three illustrations kind of make me think about what may be hard for us when we're trying to ask for help today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You said a lot there.
I know. Sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, kind of piggybacking off of that, our experiences, a lot of times we are influenced to experience life based on outside pressures.
Hmm.
And going inward is a lot more difficult because you are in fear of what you actually um, are feeling within yourself.
Yeah.
And so I've learned that for me, and a lot of the people that I've spoken with, once you have broken that barrier of kind of, going inward and experiencing what is my actual connection, what is my bravery, what is my connection to source, what is my path, what
Hmm.
are the ideas that I'm supposed to go with, that I would go with outside of any outside influence. What
Hmm.
am I supposed to learn? What am I supposed to go through? Asking those deep rooted questions are it's a path to get to the place where you learned how to grow.
Hmm.
And ultimately, us growing is why we're here. It's just to
Hmm.
learn and to grow. And for a lot of information, I've learned that in order to sort through the all of the information that's available and everybody's opinion, one of the things that I've learned is to go to the earliest source that you can find and
Hmm.
see what resonates with you.
Hmm.
So, as an example to that, so I'll be releasing a book, Starting Your Sound Healing Journey. And
Mm,
inside of that book, it's for beginners. So if you're a
mm,
beginner with sound healing or mindfulness, that's the book is designed for that purpose and for you. And in that book, I go back to the roots of sound healing before, everybody had all of these uh, fancy computers and the different variations of singing bowls. And I go back to, okay, well, originally we had voice.
mhm,
Originally we had percussion.
mm,
Originally we had these different chambers, and what does that look like? And so really to get to the root of whatever it is that you're looking for, the information that you're looking for, I think the further back you go, and the
mm,
more, and I've learned humorously, the more restricted they try to make the information, the more valuable it seems
mm,
like it is.
mhm. Yeah, I guess in my way, I think about when I was in trigonometry and derivatives. Everyone hated them, but it had these
Mhm.
huge problems. So
Right.
whenever I'm faced either working with a client or even my own self care, I ask myself, what is the derivative of what I'm going through right now? Why is
Mm.
this bothering me at this moment? Like those who are listening, wondering what a derivative may be, is E equals MC squared is a derivative of a huge problem. So everyone sees that thing, they're like, oh, that's nice. And no, if you go through the whole mathematical formula, it's humongous. So
Right.
I do like simplifying, because a lot of times the bigger at the root of what we're feeling or experiencing or what's causing is it gives us more of a better measurement, or I guess direction of where to go, at least from my experience.
Yes. Agreed.
And I think along these lines, and you kind of said it, is that we need to be patient with ourselves. I think Francis de Sales says it this way: have patience with all things, but first of all with yourself. Especially this journey it's not quick. It's not supposed to be quick. It's kind of the process is the whole point, at least from my
Mhm.
experience. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it is. Um,
and I'm sorry, I just one thing that you regarding like opinions of outside, and I'll get your opinion of getting the influence of the external so much. I think about this quote from a British proverb, actually: "Too many cooks spoil the broth." I think that really kind of says it.
it does.
Uh, but anyway, you were about to say. Sorry about that.
No, no, no. The quote that you had up before,
Mm,
um, it with patience, we are in a age where everything is microwaved. It's hurry up.
yeah.
It's get it right. Once you know, you should have it mastered, and and it's like it's so absurd when you think about how nature moves, and there are seasons for a reason,
Yeah.
and we go through different seasons of growth for is everything is not instant. And I think a lot of times when we are dealing with ourselves, we think, or we have the influence that once we are exposed to the information, there should be an immediate change. And it's not
Mm,
really that. You
mm,
have to give yourself time to develop and understand and make mistakes
mm,
and redo and regroup and go again. And you have to give yourself time for that. And a lot of times when you apply the patience, you'll see your growth move a little bit faster than if you decide, oh, I learned something, I should have it automatically and let's go. You'll find yourself relieving yourself of a lot of the depression and anxiety that comes along with wanting to have it right away. So
mhm.
I do like that quote, have patience with all things, but first of all with
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah, it starts
Yeah,
at
and
home. Yeah.
I'm a little partial. I remember in high school, I did sound tech. I did a lot of sound tech. For me, I was always kind of that route. And I remember being in church setting, and these sound equipments gets more and more elaborate as you kind of you have the digital soundboard, everything's cued in, you even have it all set for everyone who's singing up there.
Right.
It's nice, but one thing what made me think when you were talking about making mistakes. In churches, people volunteer to help sometimes, and I'm running the sound, and one thing that I always kind of encouraged was the young people to be involved. So the young people are back there. Now the one thing is sometimes what happens in sound, something happens, it doesn't come out well. There's something off. um I always encourage them, especially people don't understand sound in the church. I'm like, allow them to make mistakes. They'll not want to be here if you say this is not right. Part of the learning process is all those mistakes. They learn how to be light on their feet, understand how to equalize and kind of EQ everything, and then they'll feel more confident. But you don't get there just like you said, like that.
Right.
So something that I think is a process is probably the most valuable thing, but we overlook it so many times.
Agreed. Agreed.
I'll say this statement. I do my best work when I slow down. I know this. I'm kind of like one of those people like go 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 go. I gotta be
Mm-hmm.
careful sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we have projects, doing the podcast or whatever, video editing, it doesn't replace sleep. So I understand there's a difference. So it's differentiating those things, but also this understanding that I do my best work slow down. So if I start a project, I want to finish it, like most of us.
Right.
But sometimes it takes parts. Sometimes I'm like, I'll let it sit. I'll listen to it tomorrow, see if it sounds okay. That kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. You know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I'm talking about. So
I do.
it's okay to step back. It's okay that some these things are part one, part two, part three, especially when it comes to what's going on with you. What is that healing that you're trying to get towards?
Right.
So I want to switch gears. You talked a little bit about what you do, but I'd like to have new and returning guests. So, just share a little bit yourself. What brought you here? What prompted you to do what you're doing today? And anything else that you want to share, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes. I've lived a very full life. I've had a lot of different experiences. I started off as what people know as a child prodigy. I started playing piano at age 4. By age 12, I'm in churches being hired to play, for the services, and kind of matriculated through that until, college days, and went into music in college. Thereafter, had my recording studio, had the record label, became a full-time musician and business owner. Did all of those things. And inside of that process, as a church musician, I got interested in understanding, why is it that when I play this song in this key, people react a certain way? When I play this style of music, people are in worship. But if I switch up and I do this style, in that same moment, they'll go into a praise and want to kind of dance around. And then I can switch it again and they're right back. Like, what is it about what I'm playing that they don't notice so much that I can change it? I can change the key. I can, fix the emotion. And it doesn't matter what the preacher is actually saying, what the minister is saying. I can shift the atmosphere based on the music that's coming around. And so that took me into a place of, okay, what's the basis of what I'm asking? Okay, it's a key and a song. If I change the key, it feels different. So that means it has something to do with the key structure that I'm in. Okay, how is this key built? Oh, it's built out of vibration and frequencies. Well, what's a vibration and frequency? And what is the hertz? And okay, why is this stuff important? And so I went into my rabbit's hole looking for all of the information. I found a lot of it, and I'm still here. We are a decade later, and I'm still learning things and still understanding things differently. And I'm very grateful for my journey. But even understanding, what vibration and hertz and frequency and what was manipulated for us to be out of resonance with the universal frequencies, and what does all of these terms mean? I went through all of that, and as I gained understanding, I started applying what I learned
Mm-hmm.
as a recording engineer and music producer and composer. I started using some of what I learned in some of my clients' work. So,
Mm-hmm.
as a recording engineer and as a producer, I would take some of their music and put in a frequency
Mm-hmm.
and add in certain things vibrationally. And once their album, I know I might be dating myself a little bit, but when I was in the industry, we were still doing cassettes and CDs, and
Mm-hmm.
so having them push out their CD and getting feedback from their listeners to say, "Oh, I like this track," and it's not the track that they expected to be the go-to track.
Yeah.
I've I've done it a number of times, and to see only maybe a handful of artists come back to ask, "What did you do? I know you
Oh.
did something. What did you do?" And then I say, "Okay, well, look, I added, this frequency, and this frequency, it serves this purpose." And so
Mm.
that's what I did. Well, I can't even hear it. Yeah, I understand that. That's the point. You can
Mm-hmm.
embed frequencies and vibrations within the track, and you can either barely hear it or not hear it at all, and it still has the influence the intended influence. And
Mm-hmm.
so I did that. That was phase one of my learning, and phase two was, okay, I'm gonna create some music. I'm gonna compose a song with a very specific intention vibrationally, and I'm gonna send it to a friend of mine to see if they can understand what they're supposed to be feeling very specifically. And this is
Mm-hmm.
going a little bit beyond saying, "Oh, this is a track about being encouraged." No, this is a track about a love in a broken home, and
Mm-hmm.
like very, very specific. And
Yeah.
so I sent it to him, and his challenge was, okay, well, what I'll do, I'll write the lyrics in a language that you don't speak, and you tell me the story of the song.
Mm-hmm.
So, I gave him the story back once I said, "Oh, okay, I think it's about this. It feels like it's this." And, it was dead on. And I said, "Okay, well, that's great, but we are friends. So there's some type of relationship there. So is chances of us kind of guessing or feeling a similar thing is kind of high.
Mm-hmm.
Let's ask some people that are not related and outside of our circle what they think." We did that. The same story, the same responses came back.
Wow.
Once that happened, I was like, "Oh, yeah, we're in it now." So I did that. I kept learning and kept studying,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually, I was bullied into teaching sound healing. That's what actually happened. A lot of people that were hearing what I was doing and seeing the influences and all of that, they were like, "You got to teach this stuff." And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, I don't have the letters behind my name. I don't." And I don't know how that's going to be taken as somebody teaching something and you don't have the credentials.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that came across it was, "Hey, listen, we don't care. show us
Mm-hmm.
show us how you did this. Show us what this means. Why do we feel this way? Blah 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 blah." So I went through teaching classes on it.
Mm-hmm.
Then it expanded into me writing the book on it, and then creating a workbook behind it, and creating things that people can listen to. Like, you go on YouTube or other platforms, and you'll find um number, like, what do these numbers and HZ mean, and why do they say this is going to help me sleep, and so forth and so on. What I like to do is to explain all of those things in a very minimalistic, easy to understand way, so it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem so overwhelming, or so it doesn't take you outside of what you are currently in. So
Okay.
the example that I usually use is, um, in a religious context, when I say, okay, well, I use sound healing and mindfulness,
Mm.
a lot of times I get questioned, sometimes aggressively, about what I'm practicing, from people that are deep into their religious practices. And
Mm-hmm.
so, with my upbringing, I was raised Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of go with what your theme is, the brave healing that I kind of went through was learning how to ask questions and find my answers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very, very, very hurtful thing for me because of
Mm-hmm.
what was raised to know and believe, and
Mm-hmm.
then finding so much evidence that added to those things that I was taught, and not hearing about it, and like, well, what's going on. For example, there's a scripture that talked about how Saul was being tormented, and he called for all of his magicians and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's an instance where his advisors was like, well, hey, let's go get David and let's have him come in. And the scripture specifically just says David came in, he played the lyre, the lyre, he played
Mm-hmm.
that instrument, and then Saul was healed. It didn't say anything about
Mm-hmm.
anointing or calling in this or calling on whatever name. It simply said he played, he was healed. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that is one of the examples that I use to say sound healing is a thing. It's real. It's a real thing. And
I feel in a very I guess I feel a small way, especially when I work with my clients. I always, when I think about coping skills, a lot of people are like, oh, okay, breathing, progressive relaxation, all this stuff.
right.
But I always try to push, just because of my background, creativity. I always want them to be creative, because there's something about either it's music, your writing, or art, or whatever you do
Mm-hmm.
that's cathartic. But for me, I always get excited when someone says, "Oh, I do music." I'm like, what happened to that guitar? Like, is it pick it up again, or
Right.
whatever it is? Sing. I'm when I go to church and I when I go church, and a lot of times there's a lot of opposition of ideas, ideologies, or even just how they go about their service. But one thing I always love is the music. I always love just singing. It's kind of the one, and the thing about singing and music is that I could say a sentence to you, and it may be profound, but when you sing it, there's more. There's something that music does that words cannot reach, and that's why I
Correct.
always kind of I do lean towards that, and especially with my clients, I'm like, hey, it could be a hobby, something that you could feel, that you could cathartically kind of process things, but it could also be some healing in the sense that you're coping and you're working through some of what you're going through. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And there's a lot of science behind that as well, where there's so much proof out there that shows that where music is in your brain is different than the cognitive function of like speaking and
mm-hmm,
listening. It's in a
yeah.
different part of the brain. So it's no surprise that music is something that we can attach to in a different way and remember, and it's no surprise.
And I know you say you're kind of bullied into teaching all this, but at the same time, you saw the value of it, and what kept you curious? A lot of times I have people come in and maybe they're a lot of what they're saying is over my head, or I'm just kind of trying to catch up. But I
Mhm.
think one thing that always I feel, no matter what age you are, I always try to recommend to stay curious. So what kept you curious? Let me just ask you that.
Really, what keeps me curious is knowing that I don't know it all.
Mm.
And that's where it starts. And I always ask, well, what else? What else?
Mm-hmm.
What's more? And I
Mm-hmm.
know that there's an answer to what else and what's more. I know that it comes down to me asking the right question in order to find the answer. So it's okay. So if I'm a musician and I'm playing keyboard and I learn what a major and minor chord is, and then I go and I listen to classical or jazz and I say, well, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
That takes me into a realm of, oh, well, I never heard of this scale before. Well, what is this scale? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, how did they use this scale? It's the
Yeah.
same thing with mindfulness and sound healing. I've heard the language. Oh, I've heard the language, and a lot of us have heard, okay, well, breathe like this, and it does this. And if you listen to this, it does that.
Mhm.
What keeps me interested is finding, well, what is a way that I didn't know before?
Mhm.
Well, what indigenous people use when they needed this, or in religious text, where was it used and how? Well, what was that instrument? And as you keep asking those questions, you keep coming across different paths that allow you to ask more questions, and it also puts you in a position of knowing, I don't know as much as I thought I did.
I think I'll tell this funny story. I gave a journal to my father and it said the greatest journal. Right? I find it funny because I'm like, I always have this notion because it's how I am, my personality. I'm like, I want to make the second greatest journal. That'd be the whole thing. Second greatest, because the problem is we have this emphasis of being number one. But if all of us are number one, then what's number two? Like there is this, why
Hmm.
can't we be moderately successful? Like, what does it look like to actually be kinder to yourself? I think there's one person, M. Scott Peck. He says it this way: he says, "Until you value yourself, you won't value your time. Until you value your time, you will not do anything with it." I
Hmm.
think a lot of times when we think of self-respect, is like, you disrespected me, I'm gonna say something back, right? Or I'm gonna stand up for myself.
Hmm.
Sometimes I think the biggest self respect that people don't do or maybe practice enough is our time. We
Hmm.
cannot gain back our time. So
Hmm.
I feel that that's something I wanted to share. But when it comes to this quote, or just the idea of how sometimes we have so much external need for validation, I you know, it's not a thing that I just obtain, but I try to be internally validated by what I've done and what I try to continue to do. I'm not perfect. I think the best lesson I learned is how much I am not good at things. I'm musical, but there's so many good singers. There's so many good artists. I just get to throw a rock and I'll be like, oh my goodness, I'm nothing. But at the same time, it's freeing because I could just be me. I could do what I can do and
Hmm.
be a part of it. So, what's your thoughts on this quote, or anything you want to add or share?
Yeah, two things. One is knowing when you learn how to. So I'll use my personal experience. I was one of those people who was super influenced by everybody else's success around me and
Mm-hmm.
comparing myself to their journeys, and why musically why can't I play like that, or why
Mm-hmm.
can't I direct like that, or why can't I produce like that, and I got to learn what they did and then do what they did, and it, I drowned in that for years,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't until I came to know, well, Maurice, yes, they can play better than you, and they might be able to sing better, but your value is in production. You can
Mm-hmm.
have, how to the language of all of these areas and can get everybody to work together,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't do that. So
Mm-hmm.
it took a moment for me to understand what my value was and how I contribute. The other thing that I learned is that there are no pause buttons and no rewind buttons for life.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't make much sense for me or any of us to be in a position where, okay, let's pause and let's think about what happened in the past. That causes depression. We don't need that. Or let's pause and think about what am I going to do in the future? What is this going to happen? That causes anxiety. We don't need
Mm-hmm.
that either. Like the best thing is to there's no pause button. So let's stay in the moment and do the best that we can and enjoy and understand and exist in the present moment. And which is what mindfulness is actually is. And
Mm-hmm.
I think when it's broken down to that, you kind of learn and people start to understand mindfulness isn't this deep woo woo kind of thought process. It's literally, hey, just be present. It's hard. It's simple, but it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Just be present. So that's what I get from that.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I feel that um, unfortunately, when people are faced with, you know, a life change, or maybe a setback, or a mental health condition, or a substance use condition, or dual diagnosis, or whatever it is, I think we could get you know, we could get consumed of what has happened to us, or what where we were, or and staying present. I totally agree, but also I would add to that that I can only speak more for mental health because I experienced it. Is what gets lost, unfortunately, when we're always kind of thinking about trying to express, oh, this is what happened, and having a person need to know what I'm going through, and when they don't understand, then it gets disappointing. Humanity, my own humanity, gets away, because the thing is, I'm not living my life, I'm living my life to be explained, over explained several times. And that goes back to the whole being kinder to yourself, the whole
Yes.
idea that it will take the time it takes, but you're going to be the one living it. So I would
Right.
always kind of express a degree of kindness. One person I had on my podcast, he was a Vietnam vet, and he says, um, try to you may get a bad hand in life, but play it well. Those who the idea is you're the being second best may be awesome. When we're kids, who's the
Right.
best singer? Everyone. Who's the best
Right.
dancer? Everyone. Those simplicity is the thing that I feel really brings sometimes the best moments. We sometimes take too long to notice that we live with ourselves, and how we treat ourselves may dictate how we go about our lives and moving forward. And that is bravery, and which leads me to the last kind of bit here. I really appreciate you coming on, Maurice. It was really great. And I want to ask you, regards to brave healing, and from your perspective, what does it mean to you today? What does it mean to be brave in the concept of healing, and why do you think it's important?
Brave healing to me means pushing forward with purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it doesn't mean doing it without fear.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean doing it without, it doesn't mean, like, when I hear people talk about being brave, a lot of times they associate courage with it, and
Mm-hmm.
they also associate not the unknowing, and just not caring about the
Mm-hmm.
unknown, and just moving forward. I think it's more of an embracing.
Mm-hmm.
It's brave healing is, hey, I'm going to move forward. I don't know what's going to happen, but the not knowing what's going to happen is not going to keep me from moving forward. I know that I need help. I know that I need healing. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how long or how fast I'm going to get it, but I
Mm-hmm.
do know I need to move forward, and I
Yeah.
know I need it. And to me, that's where the bravery is. That's where you get it. It's not about oh, I'm overcoming the fear of it, and you can still be brave and move forward, and have a
Yeah.
little bit of fear and still move forward. you know.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think fear, I think, is something that we try to, we don't want it to consume us, but at the same
Right.
time, it's there, it's present. And I think when I think about brave healing, I also think about, um, you know, being brave is, putting, how can I say, a lot of times I was in the military, and a lot of times being brave is just throwing your life, saving someone else, despite your own harm, and that is understandable. But I will say this, and I hope it's understood. I mean, that if I'm here and I'm a struggle with substance use, or I'm struggling with mental health, maybe the bravest thing for you is to live today. Okay, so like, you gotta understand the context and the setting. So if I am, if I'm a, if I was in the military, in like on combat, and I save someone, of course we understand that's bravery. But if I'm struggling with addiction, and I have two kids, and I barely see them, but I want to be a better father, the bravest thing maybe is to live. maybe to be better version of yourself. So I think bravery is contextual to the context of who you are. So bravery is not these big things. Bravery could be quiet. Bravery could be like, I'm just going to show up. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to do this. And I think when we are able to imagine ourselves and know that we are human, we have things that we're really strong in and things we're weak in. We're working on it. It's a process, and being kind of ourselves when we go through that process. I think that sometimes shows the most bravery. It's not so much that you continue trying, even though it's hard, but also you're doing it with the context that's present today, staying present in that idea. So as we wrap up, I really appreciate you, Maurice. What final thought you want to share with those listening as we wrap up?
I would like to say to really consider mindfulness practices. And I would say consider it because mindfulness doesn't have any attachment to any one thing. Every religion that I've ever studied has a mindfulness practice within it. Those that are not affiliated with any religious practices, there are spiritual mindfulness practices, so I would say to explore mindfulness and find the form of mindfulness practice that it resonates the best with you. Mine just happens to be sound healing because I'm a musician and that was the path that it took me on. Someone else's, they might be into more movement, so yoga might be the thing for them. But the thing is to find something that resonates with you, to get into that place where you can begin to heal, and you will experience the bravery more often to continue with your healing. Healing is a continual thing. There's no aspect of, okay, I am done and that's over. It's always a learning and continual process. So learn mindfulness, find what's best for you, and continue with that practice.
I would say for me, when I first heard about mindfulness, because I was, when I was struggling with mental health, I was skeptical. But I would say to those who are probably feeling the same way, I would say, at least I only can speak for myself, it helped. It helped me. And I'm not saying there's one, like Maurice is saying, there's not just one way of doing it. There's something about it, and I would encourage those who are struggling to, I remember there's one speaker would say, if I wanted to buy a house with my wife and I said I can't afford it, and it's a statement, what happens? That statement stops it. So let's just start asking the question, not I can't afford it, but how can I get that house? What steps can I take to get that house? And then you may actually say, oh, I don't want that house. But the thing is, keep asking questions. Keep being curious. And again, thank you so much, Maurice, for coming on and sharing your insight.
Thank you so much.
I want to say this is goodbye from Revive Ministries. Obviously, go to the website, reviveministriesfl.com. There's a Korean proverb. It says it this way: the water downstream is clean only when the water upstream is clean.